I got robbed of most of my inheritance and had to buy what I did get. Hi. I'm not sure if this even belongs here, but here goes nothing. My dad had a stroke back in February of 2022. My older brother, OB, and I rushed to the hospital immediately. When OB and I arrived at the hospital, we immediately started calling family members as my dad was 79 at the time. His two brothers, Charlie and Connor, didn't even ask about what happened or what my dad's condition was upon hearing about the stroke. They wanted to know where Dad's will was, especially Connor. He demanded that we find the will and get it in his hands ASAP. After transferring Dad to another, more advanced facility, it was eventually determined that Dad would be confined to a bed for the rest of his life, and that he would be nonverbal and might be able to recognize those closest to him. Dad had made his desires in this matter quite clear. He didn't want to live like that after my mom suffered a similar fate. So, with heavy hearts, OB and I made the decision to discontinue life support. Dad passed the following month. At the continued demand of our uncles, we searched for Dad's will and couldn't find it following a thorough search of Dad's house. One day, the will turned up haphazardly atop a stack of paperwork that we had already searched. The will listed our uncle, Charlie, as the executor. The key parts of the will was how my dad's business was divided. Charlie, 60% life interest, OB, 20% interest, YB and I, 10% interest each. Additionally, Charlie would get my deceased uncle, his brothers, antique Chrysler, which was left to my dad by said uncle, as well as my dad's 57 Chevy race car for the rest of his life, to be returned to my brothers and I after his passing. My dad's house was initially supposed to go to OB's ex-girlfriend and daughter. However, for reasons I'm not sure of, my dad changed the will to have the house sold and the proceeds be split between my brothers and I. Charlie's first act as executor was to consolidate all of Dad's accounts into an estate account, dismiss the employees, and shut my brothers and I out of the business. Charlie continued to run the business solo for about a month and paid himself out of the estate account, at least that's what it was on paper, until he eventually shut the business down entirely and requested the presence of my brothers and I for a meeting. In this meeting, he offered to relinquish his 60% life interest in exchange for complete ownership of the aforementioned vehicles so that he could pass it on to his kids, allegedly. However, there were a few times that Charlie ticked my dad off by trying to pressure him into selling the race car, so he may wanted to sell it. Initially, we agreed to this, until we saw the agreement that they had their attorney draft. In this agreement was an indemnity clause that states that we couldn't hold him responsible for anything he has done, is doing, or will do as the executor, including breaching the agreement. We attempted to negotiate the terms of the contract, but he refused further negotiation. After some time, he began selling estate assets to pay for debts, including a parcel of real estate that we thought might be sold for far less than what it was worth. Charlie refused to discuss it and proceeded anyway. My brothers and I requested assistance from an attorney to figure out what our options are. We eventually brought the estate into litigation, including filing lease pendants to protect the real estate. Charlie sought representation through a large law firm and had 3 attorneys assigned to the case. Ultimately, we couldn't do anything and had to let a lot of things go. The assets for the business were sold off for chump change. Charlie purchased the 2 vehicles directly off of the estate, allegedly, even though the sale of these assets were never announced. Eventually, it got to the point where the only major property that was left was real estate. There were 4 properties in total, 3 of them were occupied by folks, and the law firm was eyeing one of the occupied properties to sell first. In order to save the properties, I offered to buy my dad's house from the estate in order to settle the estate. This was initially about $50,000. After we signed the initial agreement, it went before a judge, where it had been in litigation, to okay the agreement. That's when my brother's ex-girlfriend, XG, objected to it. She never showed up to the prior court-ordered mediation. So back to mediation we go. Oh, and guess who's paying for round 2 of mediation? Me. The judge appointed a guardian ad litem for the minor, and they ultimately demanded $10,000 for the minor to be placed in a trust account until she turns 18, and XG wanted $3,000. So, that got tacked onto my mortgage. Now, the judge okayed the new mediated settlement agreement and said that the best way to go about this was via a quitclaim deed. Now, since XG appeared on the quitclaim deed, a judgment against her came up in the title search. XG doesn't work, so she can't pay off this debt, so That's another $4,500 that gets tacked onto my mortgage. I almost forgot. Dad co-signed for a loan for XG's older sister because they were close friends of the family. She proceeded to never pay anything on that loan and stuck my dad with it, and they filed a claim against the estate, so that's another $15,000 tacked onto my mortgage. Oh, I almost forgot. Charlie wanted his executor fee, another $15,000. So, you guessed it, that got tacked onto my mortgage. I finally closed on my house, but geez, I kind of feel used. OB and my wife are the only ones that have been consistently sticking by me on this. Everyone else just kind of disappeared.